My name is Jay Cantrell. I was born here in Fayetteville at the old Washington Regional Hospital, October 3rd, 1959. Well, my parents are Floyd and Irene Cantrell. We grew up in West Fork until I was about 13, and then we moved out near Zinneman, out in the south part of the county, out by Strickler, kind of out toward Devil's Den, and that's where I live today. We still live out there on that same place. So that's kind of my upbringing. And well, I went to school in West Fork, Arkansas, in the in the late '60s and then into the '70s. Graduated in 1978. School then was I think quite a bit different than it is now. In that we seemed like we had more freedom. We had more opportunities, I think, to learn outside the classroom. Doyle Baker was our principal, and if he needed some assistance out on his farm or something, he would gather up some of us boys, and we'd go out and help him with whatever he needed to do, get the cows in. Or one instance, I remember the neighbor called Doyle and said, "Hey, your back field is on fire," and so he gathered up a bunch of us boys, and we were going to go grab some tow sacks and put out the fire. But when we got up there, we discovered that it was just Mitch McCorkle up there spreading lime on his hay pasture. So that fire turned into nothing. But anyway, it was an opportunity to get out of school and learn a little bit of other stuff besides just the reading and writing and arithmetic in the classroom. So I think it was different then. Everything was closer knit. Everybody knew everybody, and so other people's parents would make sure I was in line, and my parents would help make sure the other kids were in line. So it was a different time. The way I ended up in law enforcement is kind of an interesting story. My grandfather worked for Ozarks Electric for 33 years, and my father worked for Ozarks Electric for 37 years. And as I was growing up, I'm going to be a lineman for Ozarks Electric. That was going to be my occupation. I was just going to follow right in my grandfather and my father's footsteps and just carry right on the family tradition. I had seen that they worked in a kind of the rural electric is kind of a public entity, so that there's always going to be a demand. I knew there wouldn't be chance of getting laid off, or if you work in a factory, the orders get filled and then they don't need you to work anymore, they lay you off. I'd seen that at some of the local factories around. I knew I wanted something that was outside and that was dealing with the public, helping the public, just from watching my dad and my grandfather. So whenever I got out of high school, I promptly went up to Ozarks Electric and said, "Hey, I'm ready to be a lineman for you." And they said, "Well, we've instituted an nepotism policy, and we don't hire family anymore." And I said, "Whoa, wow!" So that my whole plans, just kind of went crumbling down. So I kind of bounced around and worked some construction jobs, and I had known Bud Dennis our whole life. Our families were friends, and so we would go to their house on Thursday nights and eat brown beans and cornbread, or they would come to our house sometimes on Thursday nights and eat brown beans and cornbread with his family. So I'd known him for a long time, and I worked with him. I worked at the Washington County Sale Barn as a teenager, and Bud worked at the sale barn, and so I knew him from there also, and I knew he was running for sheriff, and then he got elected sheriff, and I thought, man, that might be the thing. This is working outside. This is working for doing public work, helping the public, which I love to do. And so he got elected. I started going up to see him and asking him for a job, and he didn't have any openings. He didn't have any money. And finally, in June of 1981, he'd been the sheriff for 5 months. He finally got to quorum court to give him some money to hire some more people. He got to hire 4 new people, which back in 1981 was pretty big to get that kind of infusion in the middle of the year. I know now that was a big deal to get them to appropriate money. So myself and Major Denzer, who's the major here, the jail administrator, we were friends at school. So we started coming up here and put in an application, and would come sit on his couch out in front of his office and waiting to see if he'd had any openings. And finally in July, he said, "All right, boys, I've got the spot. You can come to work." So I started July 18th of 1981, and the best thing that's ever happened to me. It's been just a phenomenal career here at the sheriff's office.
Before we get into the sheriff's office, tell me a little bit more about your family's history of service to the county.
Well, my grandfather where, as I said earlier, he worked at Washington or Ozarks Electric, and he was kind of involved in politics kind of throughout his life, but he ran for quorum court. He ran as a JP in the early 70s and served as a JP for several years, and then as he retired from Ozarks Electric, he got into politics full time and ran for county collector, and and was elected, and he was the county collector for about 12 years here at Washington County. So he kind of had that life of serving the public at Ozarks Electric, and then he continued that life of serving the public in politics as a JP member and as a county collector. And then my dad was he was always very involved in the community. He was on the West Fork School Board for 15 years, and then at that time they had a county school board, so they had people elected from around the county to serve on the county board of education. And so he was after he finished his terms at West Fork, he ran for county school board and was on that until they dissolved the board. So he kind of also kind of had a life in not necessarily politics, but in public service and in trying to give back a little bit. So kind of how I kind of developed my desire to go out and kind of be able to give back more than you get.
Tell me about what was the sheriff's office like when you started, after sitting out on the couch and finally just, I guess, perseverance paid off. You got on with Bud. What was it like in those days, and then kind of what you can remember, how it's changed over time?
Well, in the old days, when I first started, like I say, that was in 1981, it was a much, much slower pace. We were a lot more like Mayberry, back then. It was, like I say, everybody knew everybody. We had a little, when I was started in the jail, and we had a little 33-bed jail down there, and usually wasn't full. In fact, an interesting story is back in our booking office where the jailers worked, the bondsman would just come back when they would write a bond to bond somebody else, they would just walk back into the jailer's office and to sit down with you, and sometimes they'd even help you do your paperwork while they were waiting for you to get somebody processed in or whatever. On Christmas Eve of 1981, Sparky Spencer, who worked at Spencer Bonding, Clint Spencer was his name. Sparky walked in back there, and it was a slow night. There was not even Christmas Eve, not much going on, and he always, no matter who you were, he always called you sheriff. And he said, "Sheriff, how many people you got in jail tonight?" And I looked at the book and I said, "Well, Sparky, I only got 2 here tonight." He said, "Let me see the book." So he looked at the book, and they were kind of minor charges. And he said, "I think I'll just bond them out for Christmas, just a little Christmas present to them." So he wrote their bonds, and we went and got them and released them. So there for a short time, on Christmas Eve, 1981, we didn't have anybody in jail. Probably the last time that we had 0 people in jail. Now, the next morning it's, things happen and people get arrested and brought to jail. But for a short time there, we didn't have anybody. So that's kind of, I always thought that was interesting that I was probably the last one to see the jail with no inmates. So that those were kind of like I say, the Mayberry days. Everybody knew everybody. It was just a different pace, slower pace seemed like. Now we were busy because we weren't very many of us to do the job. I was the only jailer on the evening shift, and I had one working night shift. We had a radio operator who was she was a female, and so she would be the matron. So whenever it came time to check the women in the jail, we would go up and sit in the radio chair while she would go back and check on the ladies and feed them or give them their medicine or whatever, do the hourly checks. So just to see that progression, as we moved in 1988 into the 88-bed jail, and then in 2003 moved into this monstrosity of a jail, just to see the progress and the growth. You think back about that. Well, you kind of wish you could sometimes go back to those slower times, but things were sure different back then. We would have to have one guy a lot of times out on patrol. I was fortunate to get selected to go to patrol, and I went in 1982. Got to go out on the street and work the patrol. So, my area was either the west part of the county or the south part of the county, and sometimes there'd just be 2 of us. One of us worked the north half, and one of us worked the south half of the county, and so we didn't have much backup or not many people out there, so you kind of learn to use your wits and be able to talk to people, and that's what I found is you go through. You treat people right, and decent, and like human beings, and most of them respond in kind. You have a few that don't, but you kind of learn to use your wits when you get out there, and there's 5 or 6 out there at a scene, and you're by yourself, so you know that somebody can come and help you, but it may be a half hour before they can get there. So anyway, it was a slower time then, and so now we've progressed, and we are a bustling metropolis here, with 500,000 people in our region, and certainly been some changes.
Talk to me about the sheriff's posse. Was that still in place? What was the posse, and how did they help you?
Well, the sheriff's posse was kind of a fraternal group. It was almost like a lodge. So you had to apply to be a member of the posse. Now the sheriff had auxiliaries, deputies that he would swear in, and those you had to be an auxiliary deputy to be in the posse. So the posse was incorporated. It was an incorporated group, and they had pretty strict rules. You had to volunteer so many hours a month to come in and ride out with the deputies, or work in the jail, or helping dispatch, or wherever they needed you. And you had to buy your own uniforms and go to training. And they did a lot of fundraisers, and they sponsored the junior rodeo up in Springdale. So they were a huge benefit to the sheriff's office, because there were many more people in the sheriff's posse than we had working here. So if you had a manhunt or had some natural disaster and you needed to augment your force, then we would call the posse in, and they would come in, and they could get out and get in the car and go answer calls just like we could. They could work crowd events, they could work accidents, help with the football games, whatever we needed them. So it was a force multiplier that we had, and they elected a president and their vice president. So it was kind of a fraternal group. You had to be a sheriff's. You had to have your auxiliary card from the sheriff, and then you could apply for membership into the posse. But they knew that they derived their authority from the sheriff, and so they were a huge benefit to us back in the 80s when I started. We'd love it whenever they would want to come in and ride at night, and because it just gave you an extra guy there in the seat, somebody to talk to working nights, and some I always say that one guy encounters 2 people or 3 people, he feels outnumbered. 2 guys they'll take on a dozen or more, and you get 3 deputies together, the crowd can't get too big. 3 of us, so we'll take on as many as you want to send. So it was great to have those guys there, in your corner, and to be that extra set of hands and set of eyes out there on the street. So they were a huge benefit to the sheriff's office, and as it kind of progressed, they got more and more people. These were all community leaders, and bankers and insurance agents, and farmers, established farmers, and just kind of the pillars of the community, you could call them, that wanted to volunteer their time and wanted to help make Washington County a little better place. So it was a good club to be in if you could get in the posse.
Who are some of the? I know there was many, but who are a few that stand out that helped over the years? Well,
Guy Terry, there's a road named after him. He lived out here on the northeast part of town, or northeast of the Fayetteville, kind of east of Springdale, and he had a construction deal. He had a dozer and had a big cattle operation. But Guy Terry was one of the early ones I remember. He was just solid. It didn't matter what you got into, he'd be there to help you. Otis Harris worked as sheriff's auxiliary up until he was 80, older than 80, and he was a World War II veteran, and was on a aircraft carrier that was hit by a Japanese kamikaze pilot and was injured, and so he had a lot of respect for Otis. He had been there, and he had come through some tough times. At Bill Brown, who was a professor over at the university, engineering professor, was one of the early ones that kind of helped the posse stay together, and was kind of the nucleus of it. He would come in at any time you needed him, you'd call Bill Brown and he'd be here. In fact, his son is a captain over at the Fayetteville Police Department. He kind of instilled that service attitude into his family. So, Larry Dalrymple was early on. Buddy Ledford, who was banker up here in town, and he was a huge supporter of the posse and helped out. They raised money and bought equipment for the sheriff's office. They bought a command post. At the time, it was pretty nice motorhome, converted into a command post. They bought some vans that used to kind of help start our dive team, and so they bought some old telephone company vans and converted those into equipment carriers for the dive equipment. So, yeah, the posse did a lot of good stuff. They were very community minded. So.
What about how did that eventually over the years get phased out? I mean,
Well, Sheriff McKee, when he was elected, he kind of had a different philosophy about that, and he didn't. I think he didn't think he had as much control over them as he probably thought he should have, because they were exercising their authority based on his authority. So he had them, or didn't have them, but he kind of disbanded the posse, and he kept the auxiliary force. But he thought if he had more control over them, that it would, and the times were changing. Law enforcement was being scrutinized more, and it, kind of, we were moving out of that Mayberry phase and into the bigger city phase and the bigger county phase, and so I think it was just a natural progression that he kind of reined it in and wanted to have a little more control. So he kind of disbanded the posse, but kept the auxiliary, and was able to kind of have more oversight over them, and instead of them having their own president and their own board that oversaw things, he wanted to be able to say, okay, these are the ones that I want to have in the sheriff's reserve or auxiliary program. So he kind of moved that direction, and so we still have the auxiliary. It's still going today.
what is the auxiliary? How many people are in it, and what do they do?
Well, we've got not nearly as many as we used to have, but we've got 6 or 8 guys that are willing to donate their time, and that's the deal. We have gotten, as a society, so busy, so many things pulling at our time that folks just don't have the time to donate anymore. A lot of other things pulling at them. So the auxiliary now is down to probably 8 people, and we use those to help us with ball games or with mass crowd events. They don't come out and ride so much anymore. We've gotten so specialized in our abilities and our duties, that everything's all computerized now. So the deputies have computers in their car, and it's such a learning curve to learn how to work all that software and all that equipment that we don't have they can't dedicate enough time to get in there and learn it. So, but they help us out with the crowd events, or if we need to guard somebody at the hospital, they can come and help us with that. We have somebody that's up there that's sick or injured that we have to guard. So they still perform a function, but it's not as nearly as big as it was back in the 80s.
If someone asks you about the different sheriffs you had served under, or remember even, what were the strengths that you would give to each, the differences in style?
Well, Bud Dennis was who I started with, and Bud was he was a people person. He loved to be out in the public, and he loved helping people, and so that was great. We and that's what I liked. And then Sheriff McKee came in. Sheriff McKee was a former trooper, so he kind of had that more military discipline. So he kind of came in and wanted to tighten the ship up, and he was big on appearance and making sure that we projected that good image of law enforcement. And so I think those were great attributes that I picked up from him. That hey, it is more than just getting out there and being with the people. You have to command a respect and a presence when you're out there, because you are law enforcement, and people depend on you and look to you for that help when they need it. So image was a big thing for Sheriff McKee, and so I appreciate him coming in and kind of instilling that in us and helping us realize that that's a part of the picture. So then Sheriff McKee moved on, and Whitmill came in, and Whitmill was he was all about technology, and he wanted to move us forward and get us kind of on par with other agencies around, because it's always been that, or at least in the early days, that the sheriff's office was good, but the big PDs were the place to go. So we were kind of the training ground for the bigger PDs. We'd get somebody in and get a good one in, and he would move to Fayetteville or Springdale, where they had the civil service and had more training and more equipment and paid better. But Whitmill started trying to change that culture, the sheriff's office, and then he moved along, and Helder came in, and Helder really took that to the next level. He said, "We're going to be the premier law enforcement agency in this region," and he has strived to do that. So we're going to focus on training, equipment. He was able to go to the quorum court and get us more money for better equipment and more money for training. And so we have really risen to the point now that we are on the same playing field as any agency in Northwest Arkansas. We get people now that from these bigger PDs that thinking about coming to the sheriff's office to go to work. So that's kind of we had Bill Brooks that came in. He was only here for 6 months, I guess, when Bud retired in June, and then Bill Brooks was sworn in as sheriff. So, and then Lee Owen, Whitmill left early in his term, and Lee Owen was a sheriff for 7 or 8 months. And, they all had their kind of unique style, but didn't get to work with them a long time. But Bud and Kenneth and Whitmill and Helder were kind of the big four, and each had a little different style, but all of them together I think helped kind of shape me and give me things I needed to do the job I'm doing today. So I'm grateful that they all kind of showed me along and took me under their wing and got me through.
Let's talk about Tim Helder before he was sheriff. You've known Tim, you go back to high school or grade school. How long have you known Tim, and what was he like before he was sheriff?
Tim Helder, probably next to my dad's one of the best men I know. He came here in the 70s to West Fork from California. So he was in the 8th grade and I was in the 6th grade when he came here. But he moved to West Fork, so excuse me. So he was a couple grades ahead of me in school, but he's really only about 10 months older than me, because in California they can start school a little different age, and in Arkansas you had to be 6 by October 10th, and I was born October 3rd. It had to be 6 by October 1st. So I was actually one of the oldest ones in my class because I missed the cutoff by 3 days. So, but anyway, Tim was very athletic. He loved to play sports, and so we were on the same team there for a year or two, as in junior high and moving up through. So I kind of him, and there was a group of him and John Schuster, and John Schuster's now he worked at Fayetteville and works for us now. But Don Rollins, who had a long career at FedEx, who now works for us at the sheriff's office. I watched those guys grow up, and kind of admired them because they were always a little older and had nice cars and fast cars, and seemed to always have a girlfriend. And as you're coming up, in the through junior high, you're looking at these guys that are a little older, and you're thinking, man, it would be bad to be like them. It wouldn't be bad. So yeah, I've known Tim all along, for my whole adult life, and he went to work at the sheriff's office, and he worked here for about 7 or 8 months after I started, before he went over to the police department. And so whenever he went over there, it was one of the reasons that Randall and I got to go to the police academy, because I opened up a patrol spot. And so Randall got that spot, and then I can't remember who else left, but Randall got Tim's car and got his. You get that story from Randall, but he got his car, got his number, his badge number, and everything. So he was County 7. Yeah. So and so I was 9. I was County 9. So I kind of watched him, and he had a great career at the police department. Was sergeant, detective. Moved up into administration. So we just always kind of looked up to him. He was always you could tell early on he was a great leader, good Christian man. We went to church together, the same church for a few years, and so yeah, he was a good guy. I just always admired him. And then he had a chance to come over as a chief deputy. Whitmill kind of recruited him to come over, and he was our chief deputy. And I thought, man, this is going to be good. A good way to go through my career is having Tim Helder for my boss. And then Whitmill decided he was going to move into the private sector, and we kind of talked Tim into running for sheriff, and that wasn't, I don't think that was in his plans, but it worked out that he decided to run and got elected, and then he asked me if I was interested in being his chief deputy, and so I was honored that he would even consider me, and so it's been 14 years now, and that I've been his chief deputy, and so we've got a good relationship, and so yeah, I'm proud to serve with him.
You've talked a lot already about what Tim has done, but if someone said, what has Tim done to really make the department go to the next level, what would you say his strengths were? I mean, what is he?
He really focused on training, and I think to me the mark of a good leader is a communicator, and Tim is an excellent communicator. He can kind of communicate his message and able to get that out. He started when we'd have a staff meeting, he would have those minutes taken, and we would publish those minutes in our in-house email system so that all the employees knew everything we were doing. So it was kind of an open book. He really took our presence with the media to the next level. He said we're going to be an open book, and they've got a job to do. The newspaper and the television reporters. We're going to provide information to them in a timely manner. But I think just being that leader that is able to communicate and able to get people to understand what his vision is. I think that's his mark is just being that great communicator, and therefore makes him a great leader.
What about some of the prosecutors you've known and dealt with over the years? In the many years you've been here, you've probably known a lot of them.
Well, Malin Gibson was a prosecutor when I first started, and he went on to become a circuit judge. But Malin was, he was just I loved him. He had that ability to weave a good story. You tell a mark of a good lawyer, somebody that can tell a good story, and a communicator, somebody that can communicate, get his point across. And Malin could get up there in that courtroom and get that done. He could, but he could also come down and talk to us down here at the sheriff's office about a case and get down on our level and communicate with us. He had a rural upbringing, so he knew about, he could get down on your level and talk to you. He could talk to the victims and communicate with them, but then he could get in the courtroom with the best lawyers and go toe to toe with them and hold his own. So Malin was, he was just phenomenal. And then we had, he went on to be a judge, and then we had Kim Smith, and Kim was just that big towering. He was a big guy, just like something off of TV, big square jaw and just a good looking guy. And so, and he was kind of like Malin. He had an ability to be able to get his point across and be able to extract the information from you that you needed, whether it was just talking to you in your office about the case coming up or about anything. You could and you could call Kim anytime, day or night, if you had a question, and he'd be happy to help you out, come out to the scene. So we were good with Kim Smith. And he went on to be a judge. Had Andrew Zeiser. I didn't work with Andrew a lot. He was a deputy under Kim, Andrew Zeiser, and then Terry Jones. Terry was he was good. He started, I think, as a city prosecutor over at Fayetteville at the district court. But Terry did he was here a long time and had a lot of big cases come through with him. And we appreciated him. And then of course John Threet. John's he's a class act. If you don't know John Threet, you should get to know him. He's good. But and able to take the tension out of any situation. In a tense, if it's really, really tense and things are tough, he's able to kind of break that down and get everybody relaxed and calm. And so we've had some really good prosecutors through the years that have really stepped up and done a good job with law enforcement. Helped us with some big cases and kind of guided us and helped us along. So.
You guys have some events down here at certain times. I know that like John and Matt and some of the others will come down here for, I don't know, meals or events you have. What is that? Is that outreach, or tell me about what y'all are doing there?
Well, we have a monthly sheriff's breakfast. We call it a sheriff's breakfast. It's a regional law enforcement breakfast, and so it's the last Friday of the month, and we invite law enforcement leaders from all across the region to come. Police chiefs, and we invite our federal partners and our circuit judges, and we just get together and talk about things that are going on in our little corner of the world. Like we'll tell about maybe some big case we've got at the sheriff's office or some scam that we've had, and then somebody else will say, well, I've had a similar thing, and so we can kind of share information, and or maybe we just have that FaceTime and build that relationship that we have the SAC from Little Rock here, who is sitting across the table from the Goshen police chief. And so the Goshen police chief needs something. He knows, he's already got a contact. He already knows, hey, I'm, the Goshen police chief, and we had breakfast at the sheriff's. So he can call the SAC from down at Little Rock, and they have that relationship built already. So John and Matt come, and they talk about, mostly Matt talks about things that are going on at the prosecutor's office, some big cases he's working, or some cases he's tried. John doesn't talk about, obviously with his judicial canons, I guess, that he can't discuss cases, but he's there, and he's able to kind of integrate into the fabric of law enforcement, and so it's just a great time and a great chance to build those relationships. So we've been doing that since 2001. Sheriff Whitmill started that breakfast, and we first time we did it, we had donuts and coffee, and I'll never forget. This was in 2001, and Sam Holcomb was there. Sam was the chief out at Farmington at the time, and Sam said, "Boys, this is good, but if you want us to come back, you're going to have something besides donuts. We need some biscuits and gravy or something, some substance to it." And Randall and I, we kind of grew up camping and deer camp and different, going fishing together. So we fancied ourselves as pretty good breakfast cooks, just from cooking out on the campfire. So we said, well, we can do that. So we went down to IGA and we bought us a 10-pound box of covered wagon bacon for $10, and got some eggs and some milk and some flour, and so we made some biscuits and gravy and bacon and scrambled some eggs for the next one. And so it has just kind of grown from there. The sheriff's staff comes in on that last Friday of the month, and it's the sheriff and me and the majors and the captains, and so we're the ones that are preparing that food, just like we did in 2001. And so it's just been going strong since then, and it's talked about region wide. In fact, statewide. It's almost like the Gillette Coon Supper. That it's kind of the place to be. You need to, if you're in Northwest Arkansas the last Friday of the month, you got to stop in at Sheriff Helder's breakfast. It's the place to be and the place to be seen. So, but it's just a great deal to share information, build those relationships. So, Sheriff Helder, to his credit, has really taken that to the next level by including our federal partners, and our with HSI and FBI and DEA, and getting those people involved. We usually have somebody from Senator Cotton's office and Senator Bozeman's office here, a representative, just to listen to see if there's anything that they can do to help law enforcement, or if we have a concern or need, we can address to them, and then they can take it back to the congressman. And so it's been great. We've enjoyed that part of our relationship building.
Interesting story. Speaking of outreach and building of communities, I know at least as far back as McKee and maybe before, the sheriff's office has done a lot with its trustees, inmate work programs. Talk about how that program started and then how it's changed over the years.
Well, it's interesting about trustees and the fact that how we even describe them, because one of the pet peeves of Major Hoyt is to call them trustees, because trustees are the people that actually run the university and the bank, and these are just trustees, TRUSTYS, trustees, or IES. So we should probably call them riskies, because what you're doing is taking inmates that are convicted of a crime, and you're giving them a little extra freedoms and authorities in exchange for working for you. So we've been using them since I started. The trustees were the ones that washed the dishes and mopped the floors, and they were our janitorial crew, and in some cases our maintenance crew, and washed the cars and helped fix the cars if we needed it. So we've always used them But whenever McKee came in, we became pretty quickly overcrowded in our little 88-bed jail, and so he said we've got to come up with another way to take care of these people that are committed to the county jail. So he instituted a work program, or called it a work release program, where people would come in and they had to pay a fee to do this because we have to carry insurance on them and buy their little reflective vest. So they would come in on a Saturday. Typically, they would maybe get a 30-day sentence for whatever crime they committed, and they would come in on a Saturday and go out and work picking up trash or raking leaves in front of the office or whatever job needed done, and then they would work 8 hours and they would go home, and then they would get as trustees, they get 2 days credit for 1 day served. So they would get 2 days credit onto their 30 days for coming and working that Saturday. And that program started off pretty small. We had a couple people managing it, and it just ballooned. We've got 150 people on it now that come out, and so they're able to stay at home, able to still keep a job, and help take care of their families, but still come in and pay their little debt to society. So it's been a great tool to manage our jail population for the people that are committed. So we use those people, and then we have the actual trustees that have to stay in jail, and so they're the ones that perform all the labor. All our meals are prepared with inmate labor. So they're trustees. They're actually from the state prison system, kind of long term. They call them Act 309 prisoners, and so they're long term. They're here for a year or two or three, and so they've got their TB test, and they're all certified as healthy, and so we bring them in. They help prepare all the meals. They do all the cooking and the cleaning in the kitchen. They do all our laundry, and so yeah, we've really able to save a lot of money at the county level by using inmate labor. That's how we can feed these meals back here for $1.05 a meal, is because we have inmates that are doing the bulk of the labor, and then we just have a management company that makes sure all the food here and oversees the inmates. So, but anyway, it's a great tool here at the sheriff's office. But you get some interesting characters in sometimes as your trustees. So you have to be guarded, and that's why I say sometimes we probably should call them riskies, because instead of trustees, because you really can't trust them. You're kind of a risk, because they'll take advantage of a situation if they get a chance to make some hooch, or which is ferment some fruit cocktail. Maybe we had fruit cocktail for supper, and so they can hoard some up and ferment it and then strain it through a loaf of bread, and they'll make them some little home brew back there. So we're always looking for places they might try to stash that. Kitchen's a great place because it's usually a warm area, and so they can get it to ferment, or they'll push it down in the drain, down in the shower drain or whatever, into the trash sacks. A lot of different ways they try to get one over on you, try to sneak in cigarettes or whatever they can. So that's why I say we should probably call them riskies sometimes, because they're kind of a risk to have, but we couldn't function here without them.
What are some of the bigger projects maybe that you've helped with out in the communities where you take out the inmate laborers or trustees and work on stuff? Because I know, like at Cane Hill, when we did the festival, they used to come out and cut the cane, and I've seen them over at different communities doing different things that basically really bring in a lot of help, and these communities appreciate it. Yeah. Can you think of some examples?
Well, so some of the examples we use our trustees for is like the Eminent Augustine Foundation does the big Easter feed. They do a lot of community stuff, so we go over there and help them sort through donated clothing. We help them clean the place up when they get ready to do their big Easter feed. We go up when they have Bikes and Blues and Barbecue, and help the city move barricades around and put street barricades up. We go to Cane Hill and help with that festival whenever they cut their cane. So we can help any nonprofit, and so there are some good ones out there that have asked us to help them. The EOA that helps the children, kind of the early learning stuff. We help them spread mulch in their playground and rake their leaves, and we help down at the senior centers when they get their monthly commodities in. We help deliver those, spread those out, the cheese and different commodities that come in. We mow and weed eat down at the Fayetteville Senior Center to help them out. So yeah, a lot of different activities that we do with this pool of trustees that we're able to do a lot of good for the community. And I think it's part of what separates the sheriff's office from maybe some of the municipal police departments is we have that workforce, and if there's a natural disaster that happens, and a tornado comes, and there's limbs strewn up and down the road, then the road department calls us, or the cities call us and say, hey, can you send any of your labor force out to help us clear the streets? And we do that all the time when there's a natural disaster, an ice storm or a tornado or something. We'll send our detainees out, and they'll drag brush out of the road so that emergency personnel can get through. They'll grab a chainsaw and cut up, clean somebody's driveway out so they can at least get to the road or whatever. We're fortunate that we have that and that ability to use them, where the municipalities don't have that. So we're able as a sheriff's office to go out and do a lot of good stuff for the community. In addition to being the law enforcement in the rural parts of the county, we're able to go out and do a lot of good stuff too. So.
What are some other stories you can think of? Maybe stuff I hadn't asked about, or some stuff that stands out, some memories over time.
Oh wow! Some of the things that I can remember, especially from early days, we used to have a manhunt. Almost, gosh, seemed like every quarter we'd have a manhunt. I mean, when we'd had a manhunt, it was a dragnet manhunt. We would stay out and work, 24 hours straight, and go home and sleep 4 hours, and come back and work another 24 hours. We'd occasionally have somebody in the old jail would slip out of jail for whatever reason. We'd have a big dragnet to try to round that person up. We'd have major crimes where we would be out looking for burglary suspects and be hot on their trail. It seemed like Bud Dennis, I don't know, he just attracted them. And then, whenever he was sheriff, we would have manhunts all the time, and we'd get out and be out, like I say, all night and all day, and sleep a little bit and go again. So there are some really good memories that were made at some of those command posts and roadblocks, and you're working with people from other agencies and get to know them. When we would go to, they would have a big manhunt maybe in Madison or Carroll County, and the sheriff would assemble a group of us deputies. We'd go over and assist them in whatever they needed, and we'd either run the roadblocks or help them search houses or whatever. So it seems like as we've progressed into our more urban county, that those are getting less and less. We don't have like big dragnet manhunts anymore, because we've got instant communication now. And we've got we're looking for somebody, we can put it on social media and usually have somebody identified in a few days with that power of social media. So, but I kind of miss some of that, getting out and boots on the ground. And I've been in this administrative position for 14 years now, and so you kind of miss sometimes getting out, mixing it up with the guys. But yeah, I don't know any memorable stuff. As I was working patrol, some of the best memories was when you could really help somebody out of a bad situation. I remember a time down at Lincoln, south of Lincoln, a lady had lost her 5-year-old son. They'd been looking for him for an hour, and they could not find him. And so we mobilized. We went out there and we were searching. You're thinking the worst. We're searching the wells, and we're searching if there's any old refrigerators laying around, because we're, you're thinking the worst as you're going out there and searching old chicken houses. And it was getting dark, and I asked the lady. I said, it was in a trailer house, and rickety steps getting up to it. And I said, are you sure that you've searched this house good? Oh, I've looked good. I said, let's look one more time. So we went in the house and we started searching. They had a waterbed in the back bedroom, and this boy had gotten in a little trouble and had got mad and ran off, or ran away from his mom, but still in the house. But then she couldn't find him. She thought he'd snuck out the door because he was mad. Well, there was a void up in the headboard of that water, and we'd been looking for this kid for 3 hours. There was a void up under the headboard of that waterbed, and he had found him a little hidey place, and he crawled back up in that and fell asleep. I say he didn't hear us yelling or anything. So be able to get him awake and pull him out and hand that boy to his mama was, those kind of deals are what keeps you going. That's what keeps you in the business, is able to really help somebody out. You're thinking the worst because as time ticks on, that golden hour that you've got to find these kids. And if it goes longer than that, then the chances just diminish pretty quickly of finding them alive. So be able to bring that boy out, and he's rubbing his eyes and, trying to figure out who just woke him up, and be able to hand him to his mama, and she's crying, and I'm almost crying, and then to radio everybody in and say, hey, he's safe and he's found. Those are the things that really stick out in my mind as good, being able to go out and really do something good for the public. So,
touching story. Is there anything else you want to share before I get to our final questions?
No, I don't think anything. We've rambled on quite a long time.
Well, let me ask this one thing. Sheriff Helder talked about the West Fork connection, how he went to work for Bud, who's from that area, and how you and several others from here are from West Fork. Talk about that, the West Fork connection, and start with Randall, maybe, and tell me about some of the ones here from West Fork and how that happened.
Well, the West Fork connection's an interesting phenomenon here at the county, and I suppose probably a lot of it has to do with Bud Dennis, because he lived in West Fork and his kids went to West Fork school, and he was the sheriff, and he was a captain at the police department before he was sheriff. So everybody in West Fork knew Bud Dennis, and I'd say he was just a larger than life figure. So it's not probably out of the ordinary to think that a lot of people would like to follow him. And John Schuster was one of the first ones. He went to work at the police department. Him and Sheriff Helder were in the same grade in school. And he went to work as a dispatcher at the police department, and then quickly went out on a patrol. But then Sheriff Helder, he actually went to work for Herb Marshall as a dispatcher, and then moved out to patrol. But he just we had Randall and myself that wanted to work here. Captain Yates, who's one of our captains here, he was a year younger than me in school. He migrated into law enforcement via me and Randall and Bud and the people that he knew. I'm trying to think. There are a lot of us. Tracy Risley was in my grade. Went to work here at the sheriff's office in the early 80s. John Brown, who was in my grade, went to work at the police department whenever he was old enough. So a lot of people in our age group went into law enforcement, and I think I attribute a lot of it to just seeing Bud's present. He was at all the ball games. He was every basketball game, every football game, every baseball game. There was Bud Dennis rooting from the sidelines, whether he had a kid playing or not. And he still does it. He still goes to the ball game. He goes to Pee Wee basketball games and watches them, and doesn't even have he's just watching. And he goes to the baseball games and football. Bud Dennis is always there. But he likes the sports. He likes the people. But I think everybody saw that, that side of Bud, and that he was a sheriff, and he was also very integrated in the community. And so I attribute a lot of that to him, and people just seeing him and how he interacted. And he was on the school board before he was sheriff. So just very community involved. So I think a lot of us looked up to him, and thought, man, this is cool. We want to be like Bud, and he encouraged it. He tried to help people get into it. Get into the police department. And
if you met somebody, let's say they were from a different part of the state or another part of the country, and said, "You're from Washington County. Tell me about Washington County." What would you tell them?
Well, Washington County, if you're trying to describe it to an outsider or somebody not from here, it's kind of a two-part deal. We've got a very urbanized area with Fayetteville and Springdale and the university up here. So we draw a very eclectic group of people around that university. With the people going to school and the professors that we bring in from all other areas, and then you can go into Springdale and get into the really blue-collar part of the workforce. It's to me, Springdale's like really blue-collar, and they're hard workers, and and they got the chicken industry up there, and then you don't have to go very far outside that nucleus of Fayetteville, Springdale to get into some really rural areas. You can go 15 minutes from Fayetteville and be out in the country. You can go 30 minutes from Fayetteville and be in a county that, when they had a jail, had a 6-bed jail. Or Madison County, 30 minutes away, they got, 7 or 8 deputies. 30 minutes from this big metropolis we live in, or you can go to 30 minutes to the west to Adair County and, almost see a third world country. When you go to Adair County, I mean, it's just that much difference. Now, obviously, they've made some leaps and bounds, but, it didn't used to have been too long ago. You're from out west, that Adair County was kind of it was kind of no man's land over there. So I'd say Washington County is a unique mix of very urban and blue collar and then just rural, agricultural, hardworking people. So you can see it all right here in our 950 square miles, 30 minutes or 30 miles one way and 30 miles the other across the county. So a lot of recreation stuff here. But I'd say that I think we've got it all. If you're interested in coming to Washington County, I'd say we've got it all here. The urban stuff, the rural stuff, the in-between stuff. And I think that I'd tell people that we are growing phenomenally, and that it's going to get bigger. But I think there's going to always be those pockets of out on the fringes of the rural area that is still going to be like going back in time 30 years. And so if that's what you're interested in, I think you can find that here in Washington County.
Good. Last question is, how would you finish this sentence? My favorite thing about Washington County is...
I think my favorite thing about Washington County is just how diverse it is and how you can come into town and eat at a really nice restaurant, or you can go out in the country and go camping down on Lee Creek in the National Forest and cook hot dogs on an open fire and do all that in the course of 20 minutes. So I think that the diversity of Washington County is probably my favorite thing about it, and obviously the beauty of it. I think we're in the best part of the state here in Washington County. We've got little flat prairie areas, Tawny Town and out Prairie Grove area, Lincoln, and we've got the Boston Mountains down in the south part. So I think it's just the diverse population, the diverse terrain. I think those are the things that really turn me on about Washington County.